My name is Rick Moore, and I'm the publisher of Whitecap Publications. And I'm interviewing today author Joel Rusa, who's the author of the book All Worlds Awakening, which you really should buy because it's quite fascinating. And today's subject is what to tell an amateur writer, right? How to express ourselves to amateur writers about characters and tips or strategies for crafting compelling characters and the like. All right, you ready to go, Joel?
I am ready.
Okay. How do you approach creating realistic and relatable characters in your writing?
Realistic, for fantasy novels, that's an interesting question because you never know. But it's situational. In a lot of cases, um, it's just like, well, how would I react in the situation? Well, I don't have superpowers, so it's hard to say. But basically, in most any case, it's how would I react, or how would a person I know react in this circumstance? If you know how they tend to react to the real world, that kind of thing there. And as far as relatable, um, it's basically give them problems that can't be solved by high tech or magic, like relationship problems. It's like, well, oh, I can blow this army of invading orcs or Martians away, no problem, but I can't get this girl to like me. And that's the kind of thing. It's like, because everyone's gone through a situation where I want this person to like me, but they don't. That sort of thing, or I don't think they do. Maybe they do, and you don't know it. But that's the sort of thing that you can't solve through magic unless you're doing anything where people have low spells. But it's not really solving. It always creates more problems. So
Right.
that's basically how I approach it. It's like realistic problems, you know. So
Okay. So you develop problems that are relatable to everyone, right? And you
well, at least
have
not
them
maybe not every
solved.
problem to everyone, but yeah, it's like in general these are problems that are relatable by real people. So
Right. That's fascinating. All right.
right.
What techniques do you use to develop three-dimensional characters that readers can emotionally invest in?
Well, I got this 3D print. No, I build on what I know. It's it's like, I gotta say, well, like real life situations. Um, I build on people I know, places I know, situations I know. And as far as with developing characters, they can't be one no this is the awesome fighter who kills everybody and drinks.
Yep.
Not that that doesn't happen, but they have other interests, hobbies. Maybe they're woodworkers. Maybe they're, as in the case of Orris in the first book, really into detective noir films and stuff like that. And then
Okay.
it turns out he's also into rom coms. It's like, huh, who knew? That sort of thing.
Yep.
Um, that's it. You got to find something. And again, this is relatable to regular people. Like, hey, I like that kind of stuff too. There is no person who is so focused on their job that they don't have some other interest, whether they can get to it at the moment or not.
Yep. Really.
Maybe the architect or the construction worker like to collect Hummel figurines or something like that. It's like there may be an obsession, that sort of thing.
Right.
And that's kind of how I have to go. Sometimes it's kind of comes around accidentally sometimes, but it still works. So
I actually knew a construction worker that collected humble figurines.
oh my
I did. I mean,
oh my
honestly.
God.
Yeah. All right. How do you balance providing enough details about a character's background and personality without overwhelming the reader? And it's not
That
a minimalist approach because you got to provide some backstory and some
yeah.
character details, but when's enough enough?
Yeah, that's always tricky. And I've told this to other people. It's like, don't slam the reader with backstory, not on the world, not on the characters, because if you're wading through 3 pages of backstory and stuff like that, you're like, when does the actual story start? That's the problem.
Oh,
It's like
that's true.
I like to work it in as I go along as much as possible. I mean, sometimes you have to know a little bit ahead of time. Like if the characters well, this sort of thing, like the character's carrying a grenade, and that's important to the story, and he uses it. It's good to let them know first that, oh, that bulge, is that a bulge in your pocket, or you happen to see me? No, it's a grenade, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It is tricky. You've got to find a balance of, first of all, like how you as a person, as a reader, like to read a story. You don't want everything slammed at you all at once, because it's like, nobody can be on with it. And that's what you want to avoid. You want to say just enough about their backstory that, like, oh, that's interesting. Or wait, that character just walked through a door without opening it. How did that work? That kind of thing. And then,
really?
Yeah, and then you like, okay, well, how do we explain it? It turns out she didn't walk through the door. She went under it with shadow. So it's like, oh, it's totally not the same thing. But then when they get asked, then you can explain. So
you got to sprinkle those elements throughout the story, rather
yeah,
than
they have
all at once.
They have to come in slowly, because some of these characters have so much backstory in them. If you did it all at once, well, that's nice, but is there any current story attached to it?
Well, they get bored with it, right?
Oh yeah, I've read stories. It's like, oh dear God, get on with it. I haven't read it. I read the first Wheel of Time book by blanking on his name.
Robert Jordan.
Yeah, and now it's Sanderson. Brandon Sanderson took over. But I didn't read the later ones, and a guy was telling me that he gets so into detail, like he spent like 3 pages describing the tapestry in this tender's, like, what's his name that wrote Ivanhoe? Sir Walter Scott wrote Ivanhoe, I think it was. Which was a good book, but he's describing a night riding to this clearing, and it's like, I think it took 2 pages for him to get done with it. Going on about the.
That's just like Robert Jordan to a T.
Yeah.
Wrote just like Ivanhoe, right?
Yeah.
So Walter Raleigh Scott.
It was a good book, but it's like, okay, that may be a little too much to start off with. It was good description, but I was like, did we really need to know all of that right now? Like, wow.
Well, honestly,
then they're gone.
Yeah, it just bores the reader, right?
Yeah. Of course, Sir Walter Scott's time was a little different than now anyway. Stories were different.
It's like the Scarlet Letter with the wealth of detail. Oh my God, that's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
All right, can you share any tips or strategies for crafting compelling character arcs that show growth and change throughout the story?
Well, I kind of usually come into those accidentally as I was going along. It's like, oh, hey, this is a thing I should develop and explore. And sometimes I have to go back and work it in better. But it's like, but as it turns out, as we were talking about earlier, I can't develop things unless I'm writing. I can jot little notes to myself, but normally, unless I'm actually working on the story, it's really hard for me to come up about the stuff on
as a technique.
Moment.
Yeah, I have notes as you write the story.
Yeah, and I'll refer to them. Yeah, but I can't. I can't do too much in the way of backstory and notes beforehand, because I just get bogged down in it. Right. But then when I start writing, it clears up. I mean, I still have the notes so I can refer to them, but in a lot of cases, I find myself stuck, and I just have to start writing. And oddly enough, as I'm in writing mode, not even just talking about it mode or anything like that, when I'm in writing mode, it starts working itself out. I think you said once it was like a subconscious process going on. My mind's developing it, because now I've freed up thinking about it. So, I don't have to concentrate on it.
It's called involution, where the idea in the subconscious goes down to the subconscious mind and you forget about it, right? But it's still working. It associates with other ideas in the subconscious, and then it makes its appearance again. And then you think about it some more and it goes back down. So it's a process of continually going down into the subconscious and then raising to your awareness of conscious, right?
Yeah.
But finally, you're satisfied with it, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like you waking up in the morning with a thing in your head that your mind's been working on all night, probably. Like, oh, I could do that.
Well, yeah, it's true. It's true. Now, how do you ensure that each character in your story has a distinct voice and personality that sets them apart from other characters in your story?
That is also tricky because I have to be careful about not having every character talk the way I do. So sometimes it's just like, well,
Yeah.
what wouldn't I do in this situation? What wouldn't I say? Because a lot of characters tend to talk the way I do, and I've been told don't use so many big words. I go, well, that's just the way I
Yeah.
talk. I didn't really think about, but yeah, I'll have to go. I go through sometimes, and I will rewrite a little bit. Like I don't need to put that in there. One guy complained in my that was reading rough drafts on my stories, and he said, I don't know what half these were. I had to look them up. Well, sorry, that's just the way. But I complained about the same thing to another guy once too. He's doing a sci-fi story, and I go, you might want to go back over that and just dumb it down a little bit for me because
Right.
I don't know what half of that means. And not to brag, but if I don't know what half of it means, the chances are your average reader is not going to know that either.
Right. That's
So
true.
it's like lower it down a
I mean,
little bit.
yeah, honestly, you got to scale it down to the reader's appreciation. They say
Yeah.
that what level of reading would you estimate the average adult reads at?
These days, I don't know.
Fifth grade level. Fifth grade level.
Yeah, it's like because it's like it used to be different back in our younger days, but things are a little different these days. Fifth grade riddle, the level's pretty reasonable though, and people do pick up a lot of terms on the internet these days.
Well, if you think about it, is a voice to explain that the readers just like simple things. They don't
Yeah.
like too complicated. But
well, I've heard they
large
don't they
segment of
want
the
to
market-
read. They don't want to think about it so much.
Right.
guess.
There's a large segment of the market that does though. And
Yeah.
you got to have that fine line between making it too stupid or too dumb
Yeah.
and making it complex and interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because if
Right.
it's complex and interesting, the people that
Right.
like the fifth grade reading level won't enjoy it.
Oh
So
yeah.
you got to find that.
I read plenty of adult novel stuff. I mean, not porn stuff, but adult novels when I was in fifth grade. They didn't really distinguish it too much back then. But it's like I like to assume that in general, all our readers are going to be pretty intelligent people. If they're reading this kind of stuff, I'm assuming they're intelligent to begin with. So I wouldn't want to insult their intelligence or anything like that, or assume that they're dumb in any way. Just assume that they're not necessarily up on technical terms, or maybe they don't get that.
To meet your audience, isn't it?
Yeah, they don't get that Lord of the Rings reference or
because you write the story in isolation from your audience, right? You don't know who's going to like it, who's going to think it's too dumb, who's going to think it's too interesting, but too complex.
Yeah.
So you got to strive that happy medium. And that's kind of hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I make a lot of references to things in my books. But I don't make references that are important to the story in any way that, like, if they don't get this reference, they won't get the story.
Right.
Because it's like I'll reference pop culture, well, probably like 80s pop culture these days, but I will reference things that are I feel are current, but probably aren't. My daughter will say, "Yeah, Dad, not current." But and my thing is like, well, maybe somebody will get this and be amused by it, or maybe they don't. But either way, it doesn't change the story. It doesn't affect anything that happens. It's
Right.
just the character says a thing, and maybe they get a chuckle out of it, or maybe if they don't get it, it doesn't mean anything. They don't have to go, what the hell does that mean? Because if you don't get it, it's just part of the regular dialogue.
Right.
I even forget some of the references I make sometimes when I see them. Like, oh, it's like, yeah. It's like,
well,
what
role does research play in developing characters, especially when writing about individuals from different backgrounds or cultures? Like, for example, in Allwood's Awakening, you have references continually to the Norse mythology, right?
Right. That's why, like, if I don't know a thing, then there's a lot of research involved. Like the phrase they sing to summon the Bifrost rainbow. I actually had a guy who was Australian and in Norway, and some guy translated it for him, and Google Translate wasn't quite correct, so this is the real deal. It's like it was close, but the guy said, no, it really means this, and it was funny. I forget what it was now, but so I researched that, and I'm pretty up on Norse mythology, so I don't have to research too much of that.
Well, but
But
your
I do
audience
just
isn't,
make
right?
sure.
Your
Yeah,
audience isn't. So you've got to figure out a way to make that interesting to them, right?
right. And you can't just lob in all this stuff about, you
Right.
know, Norse gods and what. But and as far as um like with other let's see. Let's see. Yeah, but if I don't know, because I do a lot of research, I don't want to say something stupid or possibly offensive to people, which is hard to avoid these days, I think, really.
Yep, it is.
Well, for instance, I know a lot of LGBTQIA plus stuff because I used to work at Hayworth Press back in the day, and they part of them was the Harrington Park Press, which was a lot of various gay literature. But half of this stuff didn't exist back then. Back then they had homosexuals, lesbians, and bisexuals, and none of them got along particularly. So now they've got other branches, and I just know what I said. It's like one guy, one guy, gay guy I used to know, told me, he says, look, he says, don't think of us as a community. Gay guys don't get along particularly well with gay women, and neither of us like bisexuals. So we pick a side, you know. So I don't know if that's still true.
Well, that brings me to my next question then. How do you handle the challenge of writing morally complex or morally ambiguous characters?
Well, avoid simplifying things, first of all. It's like don't bring it down to black and white, because not every most characters are not all good or all evil. There's usually something redeeming or damning to any character at any given moment. So it's just like, just try in a situational way, just try to give them the best options they can have. If that helps. It's like,
Right.
because it's just not good, evil, and then neutral. You know, a lot of people and characters will go back and forth in that spectrum,
Right.
being mostly good, but maybe this mostly good guy shoplifts every now and again. In fact, that happened in my story. Some of the good guys, well, one of them stole something from a character, and I don't think he'll miss it. But it's like, because it was a DVD, as a matter of fact. It's like, oh, I like this. I don't think he'll miss. He's got plenty of them. You know, it's just like,
Right.
does that make him a bad guy? Well, technically, he committed a criminal act, so maybe he's a criminal. But on the other hand, is it really that significant consider what's going on? You know,
Well, would
like,
that fall into the category of writing a morally complex character or writing a morally ambiguous character?
yeah, and they're usually morally complex. I don't do so much in the way of morally ambiguous. There is one, but usually, like, they're the good guy. Just maybe every once in a while, you know, you don't want them near your girlfriend, or you don't want to leave them near your your vault of riches or something
Right.
like that. But they're mostly good guys.
Well, it
Yeah.
falls in the category of Hannibal from Silence of the Lamb,
Oh yeah,
the
Lecter.
subsequent book.
I was thinking of the guy on the elephants, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, they didn't. Let's see. Thomas Harris wrote a terrifically morally complex and morally ambiguous character when he wrote Hannibal, because in the second book, in the first book, it wasn't clear what drove Hannibal, but in the second book, it comes out that he watched his sister eaten by depraved Nazis,
Ooh.
starving Nazi. So that's why he butchered bad people, right?
Ah.
So honestly, he had a incredible, morally complex and morally ambiguous character.
Right.
I don't know how he pulled it off, but he did.
That's pretty amazing. I didn't know. I've never read them. I know of them, of course.
Yes.
Never read them. Oh,
Well,
wow.
let's see. Can you discuss the importance of character motivations and how they drive the plot forward?
Well, what the character wants to do is important, or a thing they want. Do they want to be the most powerful fill in the blank in the universe, or the highest ranked or the richest. And if that's the case, does the story let them do that, or is that like a desire they put aside for later? Things like that will drive a character. If they're looking to score, millions or billions of dollars, if there's something in the story that could let them do that, do I let them explore that? Do I have them become more, more morally good at this point and say, no, that's for later, or no, I can't do that. That poor old lady, she needs that $1 billion, that kind of thing. It's like, but I like to do that a lot of times, that what the characters want to do or are causes a direct thing to happen in the story. Like the one character trying to prove he's the greatest archer in all of the multiverse, or the all worlds, I guess I should say. It's like it's his one driving thing, because he is very, I guess you'd say, fragile in the ego. He doesn't think much of himself, and so the one thing he thinks he's good at is archery. So he's always looking for an opportunity to prove how good he is, and he doesn't think he measures up otherwise.
That translates to moving the plot forward, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the things that he does, yeah, it moves the plot forward. And that's the thing. If something doesn't move the plot forward in some fashion, or contribute to how you understand a character, I'm not even sure it should be there. Like, I like yellow. Okay, you like yellow, and that's it. It doesn't affect the story in any way. The character liking rom-coms is like, oh, that's interesting. It's for this tough guy attitude. He likes rom-coms. Like, now, see, that's an interesting character aspect. It doesn't exactly drive the plot forward, but it did make him steal a DVD. And it's like, okay, it's something we didn't know before. So you're learning a little more about the character.
Yeah. You build up the character, which translates to moving the plot forward, right?
Right. Yeah. And eventually, yeah.
Mm-hmm. How do you approach writing dialogue that captures the essence of each character and helps to reveal their traits and motivations?
This is another tricky one. As I said before, I try not to have all my characters talk like me, because they tend to otherwise. Yep. I try to like the main character, Oris, is not supposed to be particularly intellectual. He actually kind of is, but he doesn't like to be seen as an intellectual. Right. So, which is why in the old days he used to go for this hard-bitten private eye thing, and he'd be using a lot of slang he learned from old black and white detective movies and things like that. But he doesn't exactly want to appear as intellectual. He wants to appear as like, the man's man, the tough guy, not just some mook off the street. Whereas Nia is very smart, and she wants you to know it. And she will explain to you something, just how smart she is. And she's not wrong, but I suppose it could be annoying if you know her long enough. And then again, some of the characters are just background characters, in a sense that, the sidekicks or whatever. Yeah, just point me where my gun, I'll shoot things, to take care of that. They don't put forth a lot of opinions. But these are the characters that the main characters can talk to about things.
Right. It reveals their traits and motivations, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Do you have any advice for aspiring writers on how to create memorable and impactful characters in their stories?
God, that's the only thing I can think of. That is, make the characters you would want to read. It's like, if it's not a character you would find interesting, why are you doing it? Right. If it's just like a sideline, if it's some goblin that gets curb stomped, you just talk about, that's a little different. I even like to make the enemies that get stomped interesting, though, too. Because even the bad guys have something to say every now and again, and they don't always agree with each other. That happens later on in the book. The race of the Vlabi, they don't always get along with each other. There's a clear hierarchy, but that doesn't mean they like it. So they have things to say. Let's
get back to the main topic, though. Any advice for aspiring writers on how to create memorable characters.
Yeah, you'd have to
Their
like
stories.
you'd have to look at like the kind of character you'd want to see. And well, I want to read about a character that does this. Well, make a character that does that. What kind of characters do you like? Well, I like Conan the Barbarian type characters. I go, well, that's pretty much been done to death, but it can still be done well if
Right.
you have the time. A character who solves all his problems through violence, basically, that can be done. But the funny thing about that is Robert E. Howard, when he created Conan, he created a character. I just want a character that can bash his way out of anything. I don't have to think about it. But oddly enough, most of the stories he did have to think his way through things, which I thought was kind of funny. So you didn't achieve your goal there.
Right.
Howard or Conan was a thinking character. He's not the brainless barbarian people think of him as usually. But yeah, that's the thing. Like he created a character that he thought people wanted to read. I'm guessing the brainless barbarian. But as he went along, he's like, I don't think I really want to read this myself. And that's when Conan became smarter. He started solving problems, with a little bit more brain power than just hacking it to small pieces with a sword. So you got to create a character that you want to read, that you'd like to see, maybe even that you want to be under the circumstances. We want to go like the fantasy route there. I would like to be this character, but usually I want to be the big, strong guy that has all the women and all the gold and can drink as much as he wants and not get drunk and stuff. Like, well, yeah, that really is fantasy, isn't it? But
yeah, but honestly, take Edgar Rice Burroughs as an author.
Right.
He wrote fantastically well, but he couldn't say how he wrote it, right? Or what his motivations were. He just wrote. And
I can appreciate that.
Tarzan was more the honorable savage.
Right.
And John Carter of Mars was he'd been through the Civil War and everything.
Right.
He's more the battle-hardened soldier, right?
Right. So he's the transported colonial or whatever you want to call it kind of thing.
Right. But honestly, if you ask Edgar Rice Burroughs how he created the character, or Ron Howard how he created his character, the characters turned out slightly different from what they had in mind.
Yeah. It's just like it was how the situations developed the character. Well, John Carter on Mars, okay, well, they knew back then if you're on Mars, people on Earth be able to jump faster and be stronger than your average Martian. And he used that a lot. It's like, John Carter could jump over like an entire line of approaching enemy and come up behind him and stuff like that. And he could beat the Green Martians in a fair combat without any hassle, even though I think 10 feet tall, I think. I'm not sure, they varied, but 4 arms, green, and 10 feet tall, and he could kick their ass no problem because they were basically fragile compared to him. And
but comes the issue of creating characters that aren't stronger than all their opponents.
Right.
And that you get into a complex character, right? Yeah.
That's what he did in Carson of Venus.
Yep.
I believe it was. It's like a regular Earthman was going to go to Mars. He wanted to be John Carter, I think, basically. He ended up on being the wrong way Corrigan of space, ended up on Venus, and ended up fighting in the Venusian, like a Venusian civil war. The main villain was basically based on Hitler, as I recall. And he was just a normal Earthman, but he knew things the Venusians did, and he knew how to fight and stuff like that. And he could think his way out of things. So, yeah, it's like all his characters are different. He had
so the moral of the story is how to create interesting characters or memorable impact characters for the beginner is to think of people you'd like to relate to, right?
Yeah.
No matter what type of person it is, you got to see it. And then when you start writing, it may evolve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's a character you'd want to be or you want to read. Yeah.
Right. All right. So that ends today's interview. Can we interview again next week?
Absolutely.
All right. That's fascinating. And by the way, Joel's book is All Worlds Awakening. You get it at any bookstore, but it's just excellent. It's just excellent. You got to read it. So, all right. Goodbye, Joel. I'll see you next week.
Take care. See you too.
Bye.